Hello and welcome to another episode of the Park Hoppers Show with me, Paul, and today is a solo episode. No guest this week. If you are a travel planner who specializes in Disney or Universal or really anything, and you would like to be a guest on the Park Hopper Show, just leave me a note in the description below or the comments or wherever you listen to podcasts, and I will check it out and get back with you. But there are some things I wanted to get off my chest, so I thought I'd record a shorter episode this week just to get them going. Now, about a year ago, I started doing this podcast again, and it has been an off and on thing for several years, but I went on a trip last year and had the absolute worst travel experience of my life because of Spirit Airlines and some of their, let's call them features or, their service, some of the things that they pulled. It was not great, and it really did make my week less than stellar. And I said, never again would I fly this shoddy second-rate airline. And I went to town on them on this podcast, and on another podcast that I'm part of, I besmirched the name of Spirit because, it was terrible. But alas, this year I had an opportunity again a couple weeks ago to go to Florida, Orlando specifically, and I got to have a Disney day. And when I heard about this opportunity, I looked at the flights that were available to go, and if I have an Achilles heel, it is how cheap I am. And boy, oh boy, did Spirit get me on the hook a $90 round trip flight. And that is unheard of. I mean, the thought of driving to Orlando, it's about 12 to 13 hours without stops from where I am. And, not just that, it's about a 2-hour flight. And the price of gas to drive that would be more than $90 one way, much less round trip. So if there's anything that's going to get me back in your good graces, it's Spirit's dirt cheap flying policy. So I said, all right, you know what? Big yellow airline, you get one more shot at glory with this guy. And boy, did Spirit knock it out of the park. Spirit really did fully redeem themselves in my eyes this year. And, it takes a lot to get me back, but a $90 round trip flight. And that is, of course, if you get on Spirit's website and you start checking it out. As a friend of mine is currently in Orlando and asked me about he asked me if it was worth going on Spirit or trying to get a real flight, as we call them. And I said, listen, if you can go with no perks, it's the way to go. But it is no perks, no frills. I mean, for $90, you don't get a carry-on. You don't get a checked bag. I was only going for 2 days, so I took a bag that was small enough, and I'm doing it with my hands in case you're watching my video, but a small enough bag that it would go under the seat in front of me. And I tested it out in the little bin they've got out front. So you get your free personal item. And I wasn't taking much stuff. I just had a camera and a couple pairs of pants and shirts, and I was good to go. So for $90, you can't beat it. If you wanted to add a bag, I believe it's $50. But before you get excited, that's $50 both ways. So it's still another $100. So it doubles the price of the flight. But still, at $200, you're doing better than, say, Southwest, which I will tell you, I've loved Southwest in the past. I love how cheap they were and how really comfortable, actually, Southwest, and I'm going to say Southwest was a great airline. I used to travel quite a bit for work, and I would get on a Southwest flight as often as I could because it was so much less expensive than a Delta or a United or something like that. Just as smooth, so comfortable, so easygoing. And you got a couple of checked bags if you had to. I always had a bunch of camera and photography and video gear with me, so I did my best to never check a bag. But if you wanted to, that was available. And recently they have taken that perk away. They are trying to, they say, for the sake of money or the sake of more revenue, they're starting to charge for bags. They're starting to take away all the perks that made them stand out from the other major airlines. So I'm not sure, but I feel like in about a year, they're going to realize the mistake they made because everything that made them stand out is now going away. But if, like me, you're cheap and you want to go on a flight and you don't have a lot to carry, I would say Spirit did me right this time. Not only was it smooth sailing and none of the issues of last year with the broken down planes and such, I got to Orlando 30 minutes early, and I got back to my home 30 minutes early on the way back in. So I do not know if I would recommend them for longer than a 2 hour flight. They're not the most comfortable. They're not the most, again, you're not getting any extra perks. You're not getting food. If you're getting a drink, they're actually charging you for it. But I mean, it's $90 for a ticket. You can't complain too much when you're begging for seats like that. So good job, Spirit. And if I need to make another quick trip to Orlando anytime soon, I will definitely check that out. Now, I was in Orlando to shoot some business meetings for a client of mine who loves Disney and likes to have his meetings close to the parks. So I did get to have a Disney day. I went to the Magic Kingdom, and this is just a quick trip review. It was way hotter than it was last year. It was strangely hot for this time of year. It has been locally about 40 degrees. And when I got down there, it was in the 80s and it was packed like it was spring break, which I don't understand why. I've not gotten a good answer yet. It seems like there were several travel agencies that were having weeks there. And it was, the lines were pretty on par with what I would say close to not being something I would get on just because I don't like to wait 45 minutes or more for rides. And there was a lot of that. But I did get some first time things knocked out of the way. And that's kind of my goal now. Each time I go, I try to do at least one thing that I've never done before or try one thing I've never done before. And this time I had quite a list. So I got to go on Tiana's for the first time, and you'll hear about that in a little bit. I actually got to go on the front row of Tiana's, and whew, it's hard to beat that in the parks. I had the infamous spring rolls at Adventureland for the first time ever. And I know that seems crazy because I've been going to Disney since I was small. But boy, those spring rolls, they were really something. And I hear you and I know what all the hype has been about for years. And they really, I'd say, exceeded all expectations. I got to, let's see. Oh, and I got one more. I'm sorry, I'm looking off to my notes. I got to try something new called the Frozen Mission to S'mores from Joffrey's. There's a Joffrey's in Tomorrowland close to the People Mover. And while I was in line, and I've said this before on the podcast, I am not a person to engage with a stranger ever. I am the fact that I'm even on here talking is crazy to me for people who really know me because I kind of keep to myself. I've got my circle of people I like to talk to, but out in public, I don't really engage. But there's something about the people at Disney. They all seem to be on a similar level. They've been vetted just a bit with like when you meet people online in a chat area or something like that, you know that they are something, there's already something you have in common. And if you're crazy enough to spend the money to go to Disney, you're already close enough to who I am that I might reach out and say, hey, what's going on? Or, hey, what is this delicious drink you're drinking while I'm sweating in line for a ride? And the drink she was drinking was called the Frozen Mission to S'mores. And you can look it up, but it is a frozen coffee drink that has crumbled s'mores and marshmallow cream and whipped cream and marshmallows on top. And it was the most amazing thing that I've had in quite a while. So highly recommended if you are on a trip there anytime soon. But now we're getting into part 2 of this podcast, which is some hot takes. And I know hot takes are not really a hot subject anymore. People, it seems to be a common thing they go to, and people really just genuinely like to take something that is very commonly a commonly held belief and then call it a hot take and then get people on their sides. And that's, I try not to do that on here. But I've taken some things that people like to argue about on Disney, and I've taken the side that I wholeheartedly believe in. So hot take number 1, I said I got to ride Tiana's for the first time. It is so much better than Splash Mountain. And it almost seems like Disney blasphemy because as you can see behind me, if you're watching on video, I'm a classic Disney person. I love all the old things. I don't love change. I'm kind of an old man in that way, even though I'm in my early 40s. I don't love when things are just taken over for whatever sake. And I will say, I don't know. I'm walking on eggshells here. I understand why they updated Tiana's. And I know when they announced it, the way the world was pointing and the way it was leaning, they thought this is a great idea. Song of the South is very outdated. If you've not watched that ever, or it's been years, boy, it is. There are way more offensive movies, but take that with a grain of salt because you see who I am. It's not a movie that would be offensive to me necessarily. It's not a good movie, but I think it's important to look at and go, wow, this is, we, America has changed quite a bit through the years, and it was really a lens of what we thought of certain people in those days. I don't think it is something that needs to be celebrated for sure. but I'm not sure that Splash Mountain really gave those vibes off. I know it, I guess, because of the song and because of the characters, it really was. Again, I'm walking on eggshells here. I think it's hard to separate that ride from the movie that it was sort of based on. So I understand why it went away, but I also would say Tiana's great. I think that the Princess and the Frog, if you really want to give Tiana her due and make a goodwill gesture, I would have said give her own new ride. But what they have done with it is amazing, and it is fitting for the wonderful movie that Princess and the Frog was. I will say that the complaint I've heard a lot of is that you really can't follow the storyline. And this might be a weird thing. I know that Disney's known for its theming. I really rarely am able to follow a storyline in any of the rides. I didn't realize that, the Splash Mountain Brer Rabbit story was a tight 3-act play. Like I didn't, he's getting into mischief and the animals are chasing him, and it's it is what it is. I mean, I'm just enjoying the ride, waiting for the splashes and the falls and the hills. I wasn't really going, what's going to happen next, on the edge of my seat. And with Tiana's, it is very strange. You're shrunk down. I don't want to give too many spoilers. It was odd, but it was beautiful. It was lush. The greenery around it was amazing. The new animatronics are just top notch Disney brilliance. The addition to the top of the hill, I got to ride in the front. I was by myself. I requested it, so I waited just a little bit longer. Got up in the front, got a good picture and video going over the top, and you can really see the Magic Kingdom. And people have said how great that is. And I thought, well, how different could it be from Splash Mountain? Then I realized, oh, they've added almost like a frame border at the top that really frames the castle and the kingdom very nicely. So double thumbs up to the Imagineers at Disney for Tiana's Bayou Adventure. I love the classics. Splash Mountain will always be in my heart, but it is not really missed at all because Tiana's is a step ahead in every single way. And now, hot take number 2. The time I happened to be there to ride Tiana's, I waited. I will say the posted time was 45 minutes. It ended up being 35, and I mean, I was pleased with that, especially with the crowd that was there that day. But it was day 2 of the virtual queue for Tiana's and Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind to have gone away. And I'll tell you what, I am a fan of the virtual queue, and that is my second hot take because it seems like people are furious that these went away. And I get it. I do this Disney podcast and I love Disney World. I don't get to go as often as a lot of the people that I talk to about it do. I know travel planners get to go all the time. Agents are there in the parks 3 or 4 times or more a year. The gentleman I was down there working for in Florida, he goes several times a year. He's an annual pass holder. And, I'm lucky. We've not been as a family in 2 or 3 years. I did get to go this year and last year, of course, for a day by myself, but I'm not there in the parks all the time. And I understand if you don't get to go all the time, you really want to ride everything. When I was a child, that's how we were. We would go. We went a few times as a child, and they didn't have the virtual queue. They didn't even have Fast Pass. If you want to look back in the olden days when I was a kid, and I've told the story on the podcast a couple of times before, but when they opened up the Back to the Future ride at Universal Studios, my sweet, wonderful parents stood in line with the most boring queue ever before they started making those fascinating. They stood in line with me for 3 hours to ride that ride, and I'm glad they did. I cherish those memories, and I think about that ride, and I love The Simpsons, and when they got rid of that, I thought, oh, what are you doing? Because the Back to the Future movies are really a part of my childhood. That ride was amazing, but 3 hours is a long time to ride or to wait in a line for a ride. So last year when I went, I got to ride Tron, and I was in the virtual queue, and you're playing the lottery with the virtual queue. You got to be right there, ready to go. At least last year, I stood next to people that had a clock on one phone and their Disney app in the other phone, and they were just waiting for the time to hit so they could get in that virtual queue. And I just looked over their shoulder and I followed their clock, and boom, got in one of the early queues, walked right onto the ride, didn't have to come back and wait. I was in one of the first 10 lines for the queue, so I just rode right over to Tron, let them scan my badge or my bracelet, and got right on the ride, which was amazing. I loved Tron. It was so cool. I will say, if I'd waited in line an hour or longer for that ride, it would not have been so cool. It's about a 60-second ride. And I mean, come on, waiting an hour or more for a 1 minute ride, it better blow your mind. And it didn't blow my mind that much. And the same with Tiana. It was amazing, but I would not have stood in line for an hour with it. So I love the virtual queue. I love to just walk around Disney. I like to go in the shops. I like to get something to eat. I like to just take in the scenery. And that's something the virtual queue lets you do because you could come right back. And I understand if you're not there all the time and you want to ride the ride and you don't think it's fair if you miss the lottery system. And I get that. I understand that point of view as well. I also understand, Disney is looking at it. I'm sure they say it's for the magic, but it's also a little bit for the money. And they're probably going to sell a few more of their, boy, Lightning Lane Multipass, whatever the ultra confusing name is for it now. They probably sell a few more when you see the line and go, well, I could pay, $15 or whatever and skip this line. I bet somewhere down the line that someone said, guys, we can make 10% more money if we just put this crazy line out. So it does probably cut down on the traffic in the parks, but I mean, who cares if all those people are just waiting in line? I don't enjoy the waiting in line. I enjoyed the virtual queue. I know I'll be back again another day if I miss that ride. So I say I like the virtual queue. They've taken them away. We'll see how that goes. But as for right now, I like the old style where you might not get to ride everything, but you don't have to wait near as long if you're lucky enough to get that seat. Recently, a friend and past guest, Trisha Scott from Visit Mickey, has started her own podcast, and she brought this up on her first episode. And I thought, this is a hot take that I really do share. And she said it. I said, oh, she's right on board with me, but it has nothing to do with today in Disney. And maybe it's a little, showing a certain age, but I loved the Disney Castle Cake, the Walt Disney World Castle Cake for the 25th anniversary. Now, we went a couple of times during the 50th, and it was very classic. And the new color scheme of the castle, I think some people said, why would you ever change it? It was perfection. The purists are really, and like I said, I would have considered myself one of those people where I don't like change, but they added some classy elements. They had that 50th emblem that was very elegant. They really said, hey, we are a class act. We're a class act company, and we're going to make a royal, almost like a royal party, a royal ball to celebrate the park's 50th anniversary. And that's all well and good. But boy, did it really lack the charm of 25 years ago when it was the 25th anniversary and that tacky castle cake. Now, oh man, so that was mid 90s, and they did not have, or we didn't have, so there was no internet. If you can, boy, there's some people on here who would think there was a time before the internet, but there was, we had a home computer and it was a Commodore. We did not have America Online even yet. And there certainly weren't, Molly and people like that walking through the parks, videoing every day, showing us what's new. You could order the VHS tapes, but my family never did that. We weren't yearly Disney people, but they said, hey, let's go to Walt Disney World, and I'm not going to turn that down. So we made plans, drove down there, spent the night in the hotel, got up, went to the Magic Kingdom, and what is this monstrosity at the end of Main Street? It was a big pink castle. They did a whole overlay to make the Cinderella castle look like a pink birthday cake. If you don't know what I'm talking about, which most Disney people do know, they made instead of the elegant new colors, they made this bright pink. I mean, it was wild. But I will tell you, that's my favorite Disney. I love tacky Disney. I love loud, out of control color, just fantastical Disney. And they do elegant well, as they showed at the last big party. But boy, they made my heart happy with this big crazy pink cake. And I was a young boy and I was not a big fan of pink and all that mess, but just that castle, it was like a living cartoon, this madness that was overtaking the middle. And I didn't care about the castle. And as we watch videos on YouTube where they're mad that Stitch toilet papered at one time, which is another hot take. I'm not a big fan of Stitch, but people were just they're just mad when they go to the park and the crane is in the shot, or they've done anything out of the ordinary that's going to ruin their perfect photo or ruin whatever. And to me, that pink cake was, I mean, we might have peaked there. They might have just closed the park after that. And I would have said, you know what? I remember that park and the best thing that's ever happened. So I like to think of it as, I mean, we don't eat a lot of fast food anymore, but when I was, and boy, we're going to get tired of this phrase, but when I was a kid, you would go to McDonald's and it was red and yellow and it was happy and fun and full of color and energy. And inside, you had the creepy hamburger, cheeseburger chairs. You had a big tree that would talk. You had the Fry Guys and Birdie. You had all these fantastical characters, and Ronald McDonald was the leader. He was like their Mickey Mouse. And now, if you go to McDonald's, it's gray and drab and sad and cold, and you're like you've tripled the price of the food. And not only do I know that it's bad for me, it's bad for my soul being here and seeing how dark and gross this place is. At least when you were a kid, everything was bright and colorful. The food was still bad for you, but it was cheap and it was beautiful. You went in and you felt good. Like you wanted to go into McDonald's because you wanted to see all the stuff. And now it's like, this drive-through makes me sad. Like I'm going through a weird cheeseburger factory. So I like the big bright colors. I know Disney still has lots of big bright colors and lots of fantastical imagery, but the pink cake castle was one of the all-time best things they have ever done. All right, so that is it for me today. That was just a quick Paul-only episode of the Park Hopper Show. Again, if you are a Disney travel agent or just a Disney enthusiast and you would really like to be on this podcast and chat with me about all things Disney, let me know in the description. And until then, have a great, big, beautiful tomorrow.